All right, so let's continue this conversation about learner variability. And for those of you that were with us in the part one, I hope you took a look at it. This is the second part to really think about the fact that if we're going to include individuals with disabilities in our Catholic schools, we need to appreciate the fact that we have learner variability regardless of individuals with disabilities. And that variability goes across a variety of spectrums. Now, we can think of that in a variety of different ways. So, for example, I could think of it from a creativity perspective, or from a knowledge perspective, or from a problem-solving perspective. Or, of course, I could think of it from an organization perspective, or an engagement perspective, or whatever it may be. But if we think of this aspect, we'll realize the fact that when we categorize, or when we group, or when we think of these different areas, there's a lot of variability with an individual that we may seem as average or typical, and therefore really blow up this idea of average. The fact that it's really a myth. And so in that consideration, what I'd like us to do, if we could, is take a look from our own perspective and our own selves, rate our own selves. And I have a jagged profile example. I have it there in the description. Go ahead and click on that. And take a moment or two to basically fill out the dots. Now, when you're filling out the dots on this chart, make certain that you just don't remain inside that colored area. So, for example, here you'll see the dots are well outside the green area, or that beige area, whatever color you want to describe that as. So if you want to rate yourself as low, go low. If you want to rate yourself as high, go high, whatever dot that might be. So go ahead and take a moment here and fill out the 9 different areas. And of course, these areas are very general to creativity, problem solving, time management. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we could alter this to be very specific to types of learning needs that we're working with all individuals. All right, so let's take a break here for just a moment. Go ahead and pause if you want the video, download that, fill it out, and when you're ready, stop the pause and let's play again. All right, so I'm guessing that you're ready and you've stopped the pause, you've completed it. And if you're in a group, I'd say compare to others. I love comparing this to others because particularly from a professional perspective, when we think of ourselves and we think of the variability amongst ourselves, we often think there's a lot of similarities in professionals that we work with. We're all college educated when we come to teachers. If we're working with an aide, they're generally a high school graduate, maybe an associate's degree. Many of us have connections in Catholic education in terms of a religious background. Many of us are Christian and or Catholic. Maybe we're from the similar area of the region of the country. We may be parishioners together. There's a host of other things that make us very, very similar, very, very typical amongst ourselves. And yet, when we complete this variability, we may start seeing, wait a minute here, there's a great deal of differences. You're a morning person, I'm a night person. You don't organize your time well at all, and I'm all about time management. And yet, the list goes on. And yet, the reality is we need to collaborate. We need to interact. Now, I'd ask us to do the jagged profile one more time, the same link, this same profile, but this time let's add in some elements that would then actually make some differences amongst ourselves, so within ourselves. And that is, think of you doing this under stress. Now that stress might be early morning, before your coffee, it might be late in the evening, it might be when you're hungry, so you're hangry, it might be the fact that you have a headache, whatever it may be. Do it when you're under stress. So complete it again, this time of course using another blank one. The same type of idea, make the dots, connect the dots, and then compare. This time compare with what you did when you're not under stress. So go ahead and take a break again. Feel free to pause me. I'm going to continue talking here for a moment, but feel free to pause me. Complete that, and then let's come on back and take a look at this together. And in this instance, compare yourself to prior distress. All right, so you're back with me. Great. And so now you've kind of made that connection in comparing yourself to when you're typical to when you're a little bit atypical in respect to under stress. I imagine some things actually change. So some folks, for example, are adverse to risk when it deals with typical circumstances. But yet when you're under stress, oh my gosh, risk goes out the window. I just need to get this thing done. Or it might be the fact that you get much more organized under stress, or your time management is much better under stress, or whatever it may be. The appreciation of that learner variability is that we bring it to our students who we think are typical. We start realizing there's a great deal of differences. Now, how does this involve students with disabilities in Catholic schools, Sean? Well, simply put, if we know that our learners have a great deal of variability that we often think of as average or typical, but we realize there's a great deal of variability there, then when we include individuals with disabilities who we see as learners with variability, then when we bring all those individuals together, we need to realize, and we often realize, the fact that we need to plan and design for a great deal of variability with individuals who are typical and those individuals with disabilities as well. And therefore, that planning isn't because we now included, or redesign isn't because we now included a child with disability or Down syndrome or autism, etc. It's rather we're doing this for all learners, and we're improving the instruction and planning and outcomes for all learners, and in the process, of course, including students with disabilities. You know, I've had this visual up here for a moment, but take a look at it. The reality is that our brains are different. And when investigated, we realize there's a great deal of differences within ourselves as we are in terms of learners. And if we want to think about this in terms of fingerprints or snowflakes, there's differences amongst each and every one of us when it comes to our learning. And I'm not necessarily saying learning preferences or learning styles. I'm just saying the fact that we learn differently. And that differences change based on circumstances, based on experiences, based on supports, and a variety of other things. And the more we appreciate that, the more we can further include and plan and design for the variability that brings us with individuals with disabilities. So we're not simply saying, hey, we have 20 average kids and now we have 3 or 4 kids with disabilities. No, we're saying we have 23, 24 kids with variability, and how we plan and design for all those individuals is at the key forefront of our planning and design mechanisms. All right, so we're going to take a break here, and we're going to get into so what? So come on back, take a break, and we'll get into that so what in just a moment.